I'm Mortal Smurf, and I've got 7 Rimworld combat techniques I think you should know. These aren't necessarily techniques you'll use all the time, but these techniques are situationally incredibly powerful and useful. Be ready to bust these out when the need arises to incredible effect. Door shot technique. Firing shots through a door while the door is closing. Useful for dealing out free damage or for awakening sleeping mechs. Right-click to move the door. You do not actually want to move to the door's cell. Once the door opens, undraft that colonist, redraft that colonist. Fire the weapon, the door closes. Other techniques like click to move somewhere also work, but I find the undraft or redraft method the easiest. You can do this with just one colonist, or you can have multiple colonists behind who can also fire their weapons through the door. The angle for the other colonists does matter. You can add walls like this so additional colonists can fire through the door with cover. Or add a line of chairs or even stools down the center and lots of people can stool peek. Door shots are fantastic for any time combat breaks down unexpectedly and there's a door between you and the enemy. These are actual moments of me using door shots in my Rimworld runs. Door shotting is also incredible early game with low colonist count. The protruding door creates a huge arc of fire. I use this technique a ton in my solo colonist sea ice run. Human enemies with ranged weapons will run for cover rather than firing back. Door opening speed matters. Wooden doors require weapons with low aim time, but there's very little chance the enemies can shoot back. Stone doors stay open for a very long time. Lots of time for you to fire out the door, but scary enemies like lancers can often shoot back before a stone door closes. Steel doors strike a good balance of opening speed and preventing enemy fire back, but you just want to keep in mind that doors work differently based on their opening speed. Door shot technique is also fantastic against sleeping mechs in mech clusters or defoliator or droner ships. Sleeping mechs have a specific wake-up area. Draw a 5x5 block around each sleeping mech or mech cluster turret. For the 2x2 turrets, the center is the bottom left cell. Do not build in the 5x5 area, and the mechs don't wake up. Generally, mechs stand to the left of the defoliator and droner ships when possible. Create a wall, as pictured, to give yourself an escape path for when the mechs get angry. Create a tunnel in the wall, as pictured, to limit enemy line of sight. Add a door at the end of the tunnel, and now you can door shot fire through this tunnel at your target, but enemies do not have line of sight at you. Continue to door shot until the target breaks or the mechs get angered. If built properly, the wall will buy you time to run to your real defenses, and then you just fight the mechs as if they were a normal raid. You need to set up this wall and the tunnel while the mechs are still sleeping. Dominate against all melee enemies by holding them back with the melee block technique. Animals, insects, scythers, or humans with all melee weapons all can be melee blocked. Choose a doorway or a one-cell opening. Form a wall with 3 melee fighters next to that door or one-cell opening. The single enemy that will be able to fight stands on the door or the opening. Your 3 blockers all get to punch them at the same time. It's a 3 vs 1 brawl, so it's really not fair. Especially when you add in all your friends with guns. Up to 12 ranged fighters in a formation like this are possible with 0 chance of friendly fire. You can even add more to the sides, but they don't have great angles. Obviously, melee fighters with armor would be ideal blockers, but sometimes you just need anyone to stand in the gap and hold the enemies back so your ranged fighters can keep shooting. Throw whoever you like the least to the front, and remember, incapable of violence is capable of being punched in the face. You can add wall repairers on the sides here and here. The walls to the sides get damaged heavily by your own gunfire. Keep them upright as long as possible to keep the fight 3 versus 1. You can rotate out melee fighters as they get injured to keep people alive and, more importantly, keeping all their body parts. Try not to melee block through held open doors. That can cause this ballooning issue. Always deconstruct or just destroy the open doors and then rebuild them after. See my video on collision mechanics for more details on how and why that works. You can mix in a grenade thrower or two. Ensure to aim about here, or aim at a location with 2 cells between you and anything you want to destroy. Outside of extreme circumstances, the miss radius will always be 1 with a grenade. That means grenades blow up a 5x5 grid. It's the 1 miss radius plus the 1 explosion radius of the frag grenade. Keep in mind, things like rot stink is really going to crush mood if there's lots of rotten corpses around and you're standing on them. With the biotech DLC, notably there are a bunch of additional difficulties for melee blocking. Rot stink can become rot lung. Wasters have tox packs and they can poison up the whole area. Etekeen and Neanderthals have the strong melee gene and they hurt a lot. And imps have fire breath. Keep enemies at a distance and deal safe damage with the kiting technique. Shoot. Scoot. Shoot. Scoot. Repeat indefinitely. If you outrange and outspeed enemies, you can deal free damage to them essentially forever. Most notably, kiting is super effective against enemies like centipedes that are very slow, and weapons like bolt actions or assault rifles can outrange them. All centipedes outside of all centipede raids and mech clusters will always be blaster centipedes. Assault rifles just barely outrange blaster centipedes and inferno centipedes. The moment the assault rifle shoots, that's when you need to scoot. As long as you scoot immediately, you can kite and shoot blaster centipedes indefinitely with assault rifles. The moment they shoot, queue up the move order. Kiting is a technique that can work against a variety of different enemies as long as you have a speed and range advantage over your target. These colonists on Gojus have a large speed advantage over the tribal attackers. As long as we stay out of the tribal range and scoot a great distance between shots, we can deal lots of damage to these tribals with only limited opportunities for the tribals to fire back at us. Once we shoot, we step back quite a bit, and then we shoot again, and there'll only be very few and limited tribal shots back at us. Humans have a movement speed penalty in darkness. That penalty is the same as acquiring a peg leg. Animals, mechs, and insects do not have the movement speed penalty. Whenever possible, kite those enemies in the light. Don't kite scythers in the dark whenever possible. Chief here is going to be running through the dark, and they're going to be run down, while Agatha is in the light, and they can outrun the Muffalo just barely forever. Always kite in the light when possible. Dangling is where you dangle a colonist with a shield belt or someone expendable slightly closer to the enemies than your ranged fighters. Here we have Zeph in a shield belt, and we're going to dangle him closer to the tribals so the tribals shoot at Zeph rather than our ranged colonists. By keeping Zeph a little bit closer, he'll absorb lots of the fire, allowing the assault rifles to do more damage from safety. A double thick wall with no gaps between provides extra safety and opportunity for other combat tricks. Enemies attack random walls and doors if no bait target is found. For far more details on enemy targeting and pathing, check out this Rimworld guide video. In a double wall, after bashing the first wall, enemies choose a new random wall or door. Because enemies choose a random wall or door, there is a very low chance the enemy chooses one of the exposed inner walls after bashing an outer wall. The inner walls matter the most because when the inner wall falls, the enemy now has access to all the actually valuable parts of your colony. In this example, there's like 100 outer wall or more to choose from, and only 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 exposed inner walls. It's over a 90% chance that the enemy chooses another meaningless outer wall. With a gap in between the walls, the entire inner wall area becomes pathable. After bashing one outer wall, it's close to 50-50. They choose a key inner wall and access your entire base. It's 50-50 because the entire inner wall is now a potentially chosen target because the enemy can walk up and punch the entire inner wall. For doors, you do want spaces. Door, gap, door gives faster time to safety. Against some enemies, you can run through the first door, step inside, and let the door close behind you while opening door number 2. Without the gap, someone stands on door number 1 while opening door number 2. This slows them down and can potentially let enemies inside. Feel free to place lots of doors with door gap door in your outer wall. It doesn't particularly matter if your doors are innies or outies. Be aware of the new crawling mechanic and be more careful with doors. Your colonists will respect forbidden doors while crawling. Sometimes you might want to forbid out one of your crawlers so they don't let a whole horde of enemies inside. Neutrals do not respect forbidden doors and can always open your doors. The reset technique baits enemies to one location and then baits enemies to a different location. Bring enemies to one specific location. Reveal a bait target at a new faraway location. Then hide the original bait. All enemies will now move towards the new bait. Repeat revealing and hiding indefinitely to bounce enemies back and forth as needed. Remember to reveal the new bait before hiding the original bait so enemies don't have a small instance of finding no target. The reset technique is especially good for kill boxes like this kill hallway, where enemies move closer very slowly. Once the enemies actually get close, we'll reveal the new bait and close off this old area by closing off the door. So we'll close this door. We'll first reveal, and then close this door. Now enemies will reset, they'll turn around, head through the maze, and head towards the newly revealed target. Once the hallway is mostly cleared out, we will reset it back. We will close off this door, and we'll open this one. Give the enemies time to get around. So, reveal new target, close off old target. Now it's fully reset, the enemies are far away, and we can keep shooting them while they're at a long distance. Repeat indefinitely as needed. If you want to use the reset technique with a standard style kill box, you need to enclose the kill box. Enclosing it means you have walls and closable doors entirely around it. If you remove all your colonists from the kill box, then close the doors behind them, then enemies can be reset somewhere else. Keep in mind, it will take time for all of your colonists to get through the door and close it behind them. Ensure nothing falls on nor holds open the door. Using this method in kill boxes takes some practice and can go catastrophically wrong. Be prepared to have a third point of resetting. As you reset enemies back and forth, you sort of stretch out the line of enemies. If the enemies get stretched out to both of your original reset points, you can't reset because enemies will get to the door before you can close it in their face. A third point gives you a way to reset the reset points. Now, enemies will go to this new third location and free up your first two original reset locations so you can reset the enemies back and forth as you were before once again. The Stagger technique is allowing enemies to attack random walls and doors, and then opening up a path to your defenses. Enemies stagger into your defenses in small numbers rather than one big group. The stagger technique combines the techniques of the double wall and the reset. If you have a defensive setup but face a dangerous foe, consider closing off your defenses initially. Enemies will attack random walls and doors. Then, after the enemies split up, reopen your defenses and ensure the defensive setup is properly baited. After each enemy destroys their target wall or door, then they take the bait and enter your defenses. Rather than fighting a huge horde of enemies at the same time, now you have staggered enemies that are only entering one at a time. Here's the exact same fight without using the stagger technique. All the centipedes enter at the exact same time. The centipedes are not focused down one at a time. There's a huge pile of centipedes, and once they adapt the stun, several of them are going to start blasting at the same time. The difference in the result of this fight is staggering. The difference between fighting all the enemies together rather than fighting one at a time using the stagger technique may be the difference between the life and death of your colony. The cost of this technique is essentially one outer wall or door per enemy. This technique is probably not one you want to use all the time, but when needed, the stagger technique is incredibly powerful to help you defeat stronger foes. Sometimes the cost of a few outer walls and doors is absolutely worth paying. Ensure your outer wall is at least 2 thick before executing this technique. Don't accidentally let enemies break inside where you are unprepared. Divide and conquer enemies while they attack random walls and doors with the ambush technique. The 2 thick wall and closing off your base ensures the random targeting of standard enemies. Identify an isolated enemy or a few enemies. Exit doors nearby. Murder. Re-enter the doors before enemy reinforcements arrive. Repeat as needed. Dividing and conquering allows you to overcome very dangerous foes. A 5 vs 10 fight is not going to be a winning fight. But 5 vs 1, 10 different times is quite the easy win. Again, with the ambush, just like the stagger technique, the cost of the plan will be some outer walls and doors, but that cost is absolutely sometimes worth paying. Protruding walls, in this example, function as both line of sight blockers and as additional walls for the enemies to bash. The ambush technique can be combined with techniques like the reset and the stagger. Anytime you see isolated enemies near a door, you can consider going outside, committing some quick murder, and then re-entering your base. These centipedes and colonists are the exact same ones you saw moments ago in the stagger technique. Situationally, the ambush technique can be stronger than the standard kill box. We didn't even use proper melee fighters nor proper micro while executing this ambush technique. There are multiple ways the ambush technique can go wrong. At times, we needed to retreat early while using this technique. I recommend you give the ambush technique a try, but keep in mind you can get caught and things can go wrong. These 7 combat techniques don't necessarily need to be used all the time. These 7 techniques are options that you should have in your Rimworld toolbox of Rimworld combat tricks. Strange and wild things happen in Rimworld. Sometimes using one of these tricks will be the difference between saving your colony and starting a new game. I'm Mortal Smurf. I play Rimworld. Thanks for watching.